and higher wealth index will mean lower use. Older women more likely to adopt. And here we could say that if there is a lower wealth index, maybe they are not engaging in production. Probably they are either in commercialization, the downstream, or something like that. Yep. Okay, great. Okay. So in the second season, yes, I just repeat the same things, but this evidence is important for highlighting gender-specific constraints, and this is to inform the Warehouse Receipt Systems Authority Action Plan. It also permits gender considerations in implementing the action plan. It profits the Uganda National Commodity Exchange. It prioritizes gender-sensitive agriculture commodities to support the warehouse receipt systems. And it also, the evidence generated will inform the Uganda National Financial Inclusion Strategy. And remember, we don't really have an agriculture financing policy per se, but this information also can be able to jumpstart or make that policy move forward. So the next steps, yes, I will add more covariates in the orbit regression and do a latent analysis, add more. Yeah, so this is the conclusion. The objective was to examine gender differences in warehouse receipt systems. We used calculation, we calculated an index, and then we subjected that index to find out the determinants of adoption. The results is that better soil management and the use of more labor are stronger determinants of higher adoption, which leads to higher yields, and also more quantities lead to higher dividends from the commodity trading. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I thought price, because at the harvest time, if the price is good, it might result into total sales. Okay, can I invite Professor Tenywa to come and present to us his paper?
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moses Tenywa. I worked as a professor. I served in Makerere for over 30 years. Now I'm working with Aginsiba. Aginsiba, which is Agricultural Innovation Systems Brokerage Association. And my presentation is on water and soil conservation technologies and innovations as sustainable options for responding to immediate and marauding threats of climate change to food security in East Africa. The outline of the presentation is as follows. I'll give an introduction, objectives, then the strategies that can be taken to respond to climate change risks. I'll provide some definitions. As you realize, there are many terminologies related to technologies, methods, techniques, innovations, approaches, so many of those. So I try and elaborate those so that the presentation is more clear and the decision making can be done appropriately. Then I will give a distinction between water conservation technologies and soil conservation technologies. I will also try and outline the factors governing the choice of the technology, of course building on some of the presentations like what has just been presented, the gender issues and all of those. Then I will also try and elaborate a little bit more on the approaches so that we know how we move from the technologies to the approaches, and talk a little bit on the barriers to the implementation of these technologies. In terms of introduction, many of the previous speakers have outlined that land degradation is a serious problem and it is widespread, affecting large portions of the country. Some estimate it at about 46% of the country, with over 10% severely degraded and in need of restoration. Soil erosion is one of the most common forms of land degradation, and it is found on over 80% of the degraded lands. Soil productivity loss resulting from erosion is estimated for maize at about 200 kilograms per hectare per year. About 4 to 12% of gross net product is lost due to environmental degradation, undermining the growth of the economy that is largely agrarian. The population of Uganda is high. The birth rate is high, over 3.5%, and the population is expected to more than double by the year 2050. And that is going to mean that there is a lot of food that will be required, the food demand, of course, even feed for the animals, and also the fuel wood and so many of those things. but at the same time you realize that land degradation is increasing. So if we don't do something, it means we may not be able to meet the needs of that population that is coming. So there is need for climate resilient technologies to minimize the impacts of climate risks. The major risks are related to water and soil conservation, because what we have increased droughts, where in some cases we have reduced rainfall, we need to conserve the water. Then in some cases we have floods, and under such circumstances we want to control that water so that it does not take away the soil. So we need to look at the droughts and also the floods due to excessive water. And so we need climate resilient technologies. The strategies for responding to the climate change risks are informed by the nature of the risk to be addressed and the guiding principles. The major risks commonly found in Uganda are droughts, that's decreased rainfall. There is also the floods due to heavy rainfall. Then there is the heat waves due to rise in temperature, and also increased concentration of carbon dioxide. Reducing or minimizing the impacts of climate change risks is the guiding principle in selecting the climate resilient technologies. If we are fighting against floods, the choice is soil conserving technologies. But if we are fighting against droughts, then the choice is water conserving technologies. So that underpins my presentation, the water conserving and soil conserving in terms of addressing the climate change risks. The definitions I distinguish between a technology, a technique, a method, a practice, an approach, and innovations. Technology refers to a physical practice on the land and consists of one or several measures, could be agronomic, vegetative, structural, management, that is used to control land degradation, and it also increases productivity or other ecosystem services. A technique refers to a procedure or a skill that is used to accomplish a specific task. Maybe if you want to put in place the technology, then you have to use a technique in the way you are able to put it. So you may use different techniques in order to put a technology in place. And the technique is related to the method. The methods are the steps of accomplishing that task. Then the practice refers to the actual application of the technology, principle, or idea, belief that you have, or the method of sustainable land management. Then the approach is more of the combination of the technologies, the methods, and the approach and the innovations that you have in order to mitigate against the climate change risks. Innovation. So it can be an innovation in the technologies, it can be an innovation in the approaches, it can be an innovation in the strategies. Innovations refers to the process of adopting and modification of technologies, approaches, and strategies for mitigating against land degradation to suit the context, socially, economically, and environmentally. And I take a case of the bottle irrigation technology that is very familiar in Uganda. And you can use that bottle, but you can drill a hole in the bottle top, then you can cut off the bottom so that you make it easy if you are using a watering can to pour the water. Then you can also increase the size of the bottle. Instead of using 1 liter, you can use one of 2 liters or something like that. Then you can bury it. You can also cover the top if you have cut off the surface to reduce the evaporation. So many innovations that you can do to be able to use just a single technology, the bottle irrigation. You can also pierce multiple holes in it to make it a sprinkler. So that kind of gives you an highlight of the difference between a technology, technique, innovation, and the method. Those are some of the innovations with the bottle technology. Now I want to start with the water conserving technologies, then I will go to the soil conserving technologies. For these technologies, there are typologies. There are those technologies, for example, that are designed for diverting water, maybe from a roadside, and then ensure that it drains into the soil. So those include the infiltration pits. It includes also the recharge retention ponds, permanent planting pits, retention ditches, ridges, and basins. Those are based on diversion and drainage. So some of the examples are those infiltration pits. It can be from the roadsides. Then you also have the permanent planting basins. They can also retain the water. Then you also have the retention ditches. They may be continuous, like those on the right side and in the middle, or they may be discontinuous, like on the left. But when the water comes, it is retained there instead of running off. So in a way, you divert it into a channel, and you are conserving the water. So that was about diversion. But then there is on the surface, if it is running off, you can be able to harvest it. The harvesting can be done on the surface, where maybe you can put polythene bags on the ground. It can be harvesting from the roofs of the houses. It can be harvesting from the trees. So these are some examples of the rain harvesting technologies. You can innovate to prevent water infiltration or discharge into the ground by lining the wall. You can line it with clay, you can line it with manure, you can line it with a polythene bag. So many methods of doing it. Or you can even build a wall around it. There are some simple ways also of harvesting water, where you improve the soil and you kind of make it easy for the water to infiltrate. Also for the bananas, you can plant it in some holes. This is roof water harvesting. Many of you are familiar with it. Then you can have a water pond. It's also a technology now for storing the water that you may have harvested, maybe from your roof or from the roadside. Then another category of water conservation technologies are those related to irrigation management. Instead of just flooding, you can use a sprinkler which saves the water. You can also use the drip, but also irrigation can be done in a furrow, but also using pots, porous pots. In a way, you conserve the use of the water. That's an example of a sprinkler and drip irrigation. Then those are examples of the porous pot irrigation. Then there are some technologies, because when the water comes and it has run off the ground, it reaches the wetland. You can be able to manipulate it around the wetland with sluice gates and allow it maybe to irrigate the water along the river and then rejoin the river. So many of those that are in practice. Then there are water conservation technologies that take place by manipulating the land. One of the technologies is reduced tillage, where the plowing of the land is still done, but you minimize structural degradation by only plowing pieces of land and you leave some of the land unplowed. Can also do mulching, double digging of the beds. You can also apply biochar. This is an example of reduced or minimum tillage, where the tractors can run across the land but leave some of the land unplowed. There is also a category of improved ground vegetation cover, where you do the mulching and you reduce. We are now in the soil conservation technologies. Now, as I said, the difference between water conserving and soil conserving is that for soil conserving, there is a lot of water coming. All we want to do now is to protect the what? The soil against that water, maybe taking it away, causing landslides and all of that. So the strategy for soil conservation is to safely drain off the excess water, whereas the strategy for water conserving is to be able to retain much of that water. So for conserving, you can do the mulching, you can have the natural vegetative strips, cover crops, and afforestation. Those are examples of mulching in coffee, in bananas. Then there is also double digging of the raised beds. These are examples of cover crops. They also protect the soil against excessive rainfall. Then you may have the landscapes that are degraded. You can plant them with the trees. That is afforestation of the degraded lands. Then there is a category of soil conservation technologies where there is need to manipulate the slope, steepness, and length so that you reduce that gradient and the momentum of the runoff is reduced so that it doesn't have strong force to take away the soil. And this seems to have the largest number of technologies. There are those, the soil bands, fanya juu, fanya chini, vegetative bands, semicircular bands, ridges, the bench terraces that many of you are familiar with, contour ridging. Then there are stone lines. There are also trash lines. Then there are also trenches. There are edge rows, grass strips, contour line and plowing, pitting. Those are some of the examples. For example, ridge planting. These are the examples of stone bands. The stone bands. And you see the innovations that they are there. Why this one is called soil conserving? The technology is not very helpful. It doesn't aid the the presentation. Yeah, this is very interesting because in conventional science, we are supposed to lay the control measures across the slope. That's along the what? The contour. But the farmers say in Kisoro, they lay the stone lines down the slope because what they want to do, it's a humid environment. It is not a desert. They have excessive water. So what they want to do is to get rid of the excess water. So their strategy is to lay the stone lines down the slope rather than across. Yeah. So that is the stone lines. Otherwise, conventional, just like on the left, that's how they are laid across. But if you are conserving the soil and you have excess water, so things like in Bududa, that kind of technology can be absorbed, can be used, where you have the stone lines going downwards. The grass bands, those are familiar. You can see some of those. Then you have the trenches. They can also help conserve the soil. We have mentioned the grass bands. And these can be, you can be able to modify it where you have the grass bands supporting the ridges. So you have the trenches, and then you can also mulch the trenches and protect them. Those are some of the innovations once you have the what? The technology. We talked about minimum disturbance of the soil. Earlier, where we saw the tractors, where you plow and you minimize the disturbance of the land, but there is where you have zero tillage. In that case, you use like herbicides, and then you can plant. So it's called zero tillage or no tillage. Then you can also use the rotational system, where you have crop rotations, fallows, and shifting cultivation. But as you realize, because of the population, some of those are a bit difficult to implement. But this slide shows the crop rotation and also the fallow, where you allow the land to rest. It protects, it saves the land. Then agroforestry is a common technology where you may have trees intercropped with perennials, such as bananas, coffee. Then you also have trees intercropped with the annuals and all of those. So you have the agroforestry perennial, then you have agroforestry annual, and then my brother John was presenting in Caramoja, there are areas that you can enclose. There's a typology where you do area enclosure and you protect it, then you can have several technologies in that protected land. So you can have multiple technologies. We've mentioned a little bit of afforestation and tree planting. For now, I wanted to talk about 4 major factors that affect the choice of a technology. There's need for social, economic, environmental, and institutional factors. These influence the technology. Socially, as the previous presenter indicated, the agenda issues. There are also culture issues, norms and values, ability to use collective action, the social networks, all those parameters, and can be analyzed as she was indicating. Then for economics, it must bring money in the pockets. It must be profitable. So if a farmer is going to make a choice, those considerations must be in place. even other issues like the warehousing receipt system that she was talking about, so that there's a market and the level of market participation for that technology. Then there are the environmental issues, as I've been highlighting, slope length, steepness, and all of those. You have to take those into consideration, whether the land is severely degraded or moderately degraded. All of those you have to take into considerations. Then the policies and institutional arrangements that are available in place to support such kind of technology. You remember Professor Meka, the VC, when he was talking, he mentioned about things like the VAT tax. He talks about the carbon commodity markets. He talks about tax breaks and all of those issues. So all of those affect the choice of the technology. Now, away from the technologies, when you come on the reality, on the ground, there are many forces that take place. So there is a need for proper planning of the land. And the student, is it Ronald? Yeah, Ronald was highlighting a little bit of that kind of strategy of addressing the issues at the landscape level, where you have to consider so many of the factors. Depending on the land use, where you are going to have the land, you can have also the different technologies where you have to have terraces, where you have to have drainage structures, stabilization bands, ponds to drain the water channels, and many of those. So for example, if you look at this subcatchment in Kisoro, you can see that there are those grass bands that cut across, and then you have the stone lines running down. Then here sometimes you see there's a failure, there is excessive water, so there may need of some other technologies like the gibbons to heal the gullies and all of those. So that brings in the approaches that you actually use on the landscape approaches. Can see some of the examples again there. You can even see in this case, they even plant trees down the slope. So in some cases, nature defies what we normally have or demystifies science. So you have to look at the realities and the principles of agroecology taking place in that area. Those are some of the different technologies and approaches that can actually be used on the ground. Now I wanted to go a little bit into what are the real issues. As you realize, there are many technologies, techniques, innovations, methods, and all of those approaches. We have institutional issues, as many of the previous presenters have presented. But currently, what we have in Uganda is that the policies that are relevant, the mandates, the roles and responsibilities, they are distributed across the different ministries. Yet some of these issues that we are talking about that are affecting the farmers regarding water, for example, it is the Ministry of Water and Environment. Yet you look at other technologies, they're in the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry, and Fisheries. That presents a challenge. There is poor coordination for efficient management within the sectors, resulting in poor sustainable land management governance. There are also weak institutional and human resource capacity, resulting from lack of institutional framework of cooperation for the SLM stakeholders to create market value for environment-friendly products and packages through certification and traceability systems. The lack of sustainability is that the different stakeholders are not getting their market share. Is there a system that provides for the value added to be equitably shared? That remains a challenge. If that framework is not there, and others, maybe the traders just go and buy commodities and they get high profit, then that does not help. But if you can have a framework of cooperation that defines who are all the value actors for the goods and services that can accrue out of adopting the different climate resilient technologies, then it will encourage adoption and mitigate against the negative impacts of climate change. Then there are issues of financial constraints, and I think they are being addressed in the other pavilion. The laws, regulations, bylaws, standards, due to lack of financing mechanism. Then there is increased demographic pressure resulting in land conflicts, encroachments, and all of those people going on land that's not suitable, and that creates a barrier. Then there are also increased production and market risks. Then there are also delays in reviewing the policies. Many of the policies have stayed on the shelf for a long time. I wanted to highlight one issue regarding the challenges of the science policy interface pertaining to technologies. What happens is that if the stakeholders are getting familiar with maybe some approaches, like many people are mentioning climate smart agriculture, when you go to the conference of parties and the negotiations, sometimes the dynamics shift. For example, now they are saying climate smart agriculture is not good. What many other actors are advocating for is for regenerative agriculture. And that confuses the government, it confuses the different actors, because they are familiar with that and that's what they are adopting. Everybody is saying, let's do climate smart what? Agriculture. But at the international level, they are talking more about regenerative agriculture. So I wanted to use this example to show you the difference and how this complicates the adoption of sustainable land management. In that when people are getting used to something, the dynamics internationally change. The definition for climate smart agriculture, which in other words is what we call sustainable intensification, is that agricultural practices that sustainably increase productivity and system resilience while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Then for the regenerative agriculture, it is more of a holistic approach that takes into consideration the agroecological principles to ensure social, economic, and environmental sustainability. By rebuilding the soil organic matter, restoring the degraded soil biodiversity, ensuring that you have improved natural cycles for water and for nutrients, for increased production and farmers' income. So you realize all the ideas are good, they are all looking towards what? Sustainability. But then there are intricate differences that requires the different stakeholders to come together and appreciate the differences and then make choices, and then we have in place policies that can actually support the adoption and implementation of those technologies. So climate smart agriculture technologies are divided into three major categories. Those that are related to soil management, water management, and crop management. For conservation, for soil management, there is conservation agriculture that deals with protecting the land, such as no-till or zero tillage. and also use of integrated soil fertility management, where you combine both organic and inorganic fertilizers. Then for water management, there is of course the use of the water conserving technologies like we have seen, the drip irrigation and sprinkler. But also in climate smart agriculture, they allow the use of drought tolerant maize varieties and hybrids. Then in terms of crop management, there is breeding for higher yielding crop varieties, breeding drought and heat resistant varieties, hybrids, and even GMOs are accepted. Use of more benign weed controllers can also be done. Then of use of herbicides, herbicide tolerant and persistent resistant crops. So it's important to fully understand what climate smart agriculture is. Then now other people are advocating for regenerative agriculture. The principles of regenerative agriculture in agroecology include promotion of biomass recycling and nutrient balances. And the practices that are here are common or are shared with those of climate smart agriculture, such as conservation agriculture, of low or no tillage practices, land protection against erosion. Then there is ensuring favorable soil conditions for plant growth by managing soil organic matter and increasing biological activity. This can be done through composting, manuring, moisture management. Then the other principle is minimizing losses due to flows of soil radiation, air, and water. So it requires microclimate managing, water harvesting, soil management through increased soil cover, use of biochar. Then there is also the fourth principle of promoting species and genetic diversity. This may include polyculture rather than monoculture, agroforestry, aquaculture, pasture cropping, perennial crops, crop livestock, mixtures, and the like. Those of you who were here yesterday, you saw what Dr. Emma Naluima is doing. Then the fifth principle is promotion of key ecological processes and services by facilitating beneficial biological interactions and synergies among agrobiodiversity components. This includes organic soil matter management, using planned grazing, rhizobia, mycorrhiza, and all of those. I'm told I need to end. Yeah, so this is just to highlight that the approaches are based on principles, and I want to end with the recommendations. I strongly believe, by just using a few of the examples I've highlighted, that we need a community of practice that can be able to unpack some of these issues and repack them in simple messages, even for the different laws that we have nationally and internationally. Then that can help the legislators to make policies that can create an enabling what? Environment. The second thing is that we need the market-oriented capacity building, where the different stakeholders who are adding values, SLM goods and services, can take a stake. So that capacity building program, which is holistic and comprehensive, must be in place if we are to have sustainable land management. Then the other one, I think, is the issue being handled by the other forum, that there should be sustainable financing mechanism. And finally, I believe we need a national soil and water institution. Yeah, that's the last. That's
okay, guys. I know we thought we'd just break for lunch. I think colleagues who are about to present, the sugars are going low. Would you accept? Yeah, even the presenters accept here. But Dr. Loshapia is an exhibitor. He's a man from Cotido. He has a stall there. Nobody is watching his stall. So he's begging that we give him just 10 minutes It tells us it's already go to the exhibit. Otherwise, yeah? He's come. You told me he's alone. He's told us. Do you want us to continue? I think the sugars are low. Just, I have 3 presenters go after him. That's another 30 minutes. Can we make it? No, I think no. Let's go. Let's give Lochap a chance to go for lunch. Even as here, people are slowly. Then we shall come. Because I think his stall is alone.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Okurut.
Take 8 minutes. I won't give you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am called Charles Longoli and not Dr. Lochap. I am the programs manager for Caritas Kotido Diocese. I'm standing here on his behalf because he has different engagements outside the country. So I will be representing him in presenting the technologies and approaches that have worked in extreme weather conditions in the Caramoja sub-region to boost food security. So Professor Emeka also hinted on most of these the greenhouse effects, and I don't wish to repeat that. We already know that. And specifically in the Caramoja sub-region, we are mainly practicing agriculture on rain-fed. So you can see that if in the verge of this climate change, we are only on rain-fed agriculture, and then Caramoja definitely suffers most of the impacts, more than any other region in the country. So, as Caritas Kotido Diocese, what are we doing to overcome the impacts of climate change? Mitigating or adapting? Caritas Kotido in the past 10 years has had programs or projects that have been geared towards promoting climate-smart agricultural technologies that have built the adaptive capacities of these farmers. And the goal for the past 10 years was to improve the adaptive capacities of farmers to climate shocks or stresses, and to improve and sustain food security and diversify the livelihoods of these farmers under those different projects. So the specific objectives in these past 10 years are to improve household food security and nutrition security for those farmer households, and then we have to increase and sustain household incomes, and then we have to enhance the community's capacity to adapt or become resilient to man-made and climate shocks. So what are some of these interventions we have been implementing the past 10 years? We have the NUSAF2, which was funded by DFID and WFP. And then we have the ecosystem restoration, disaster risk reduction by CODAID and EU. And then we had the community managed disaster risk reduction, still by CODAID. And then we had the Desire project by GIZ and CODAID. Then we have the ongoing New York program in ABIM, that is by USAID and CRS. And then the implementing partner is Caritas Kotido Diocese. And then we have the Integrated Food Security Project, which is also ongoing. And then the Match Fund 4, funded by CAFOD and DFID respectively. And then, so what are those interventions that we have been practicing for the past 10 years that have seen increase in adaptive capacities of these farmers? So one of them is the agroecological farming system, which most of the presenters here have said already. So we have promoted the use of agroforestry or tree planting, integrated pest management, farmer-managed natural regeneration. That is what Professor Moses was saying, that we are moving from climate smart to natural regeneration. And then we have also adopted the use of ZIPITs. I don't want to repeat this. And I'm proud that I worked with Dr. Paulo Kulo in Abuin. And one of the technologies we are promoting in Caramoja was this when I was there. And this has been disseminated widely. We're also practicing it in the northern part of Caramoja, and we have seen improvement in yields. We also have RIP lines in Wilela, that is a BIM district. The other technologies are definitely the water and soil and water conservation. I've put them together. So one of them is mulching. We have promoted the use of mulch to retain the surface water and ensure that these crops sustain the harsh climates. And then the other approach, we have the sustainable water use management approaches. And then here we are promoting the use of the 3 R's strategy. These 3 R's are recharge, retain, and then reuse. So these are technologies which increase the availability of subsurface water for domestic use and for production in arid and semi-arid lands. And some of these technologies are the subsurface dams, check dams, shallow wells, micro catchments, rock catchments, and etc. And that is an example of a micro dam in Nyakwai, that is a Beam district, which was constructed under NUSAF 2. And then we have the other technologies under that 3R strategy. We have the subsurface dams. These ones are normally laid across the river, and their work is actually this is a water harvesting technique in areas where there is low surface water. So there you construct again a subsurface well where the communities will access the water from in terms of drought. So still those are the dams I'm talking about. That is Long Arrow Dam. This is in Kotido. And then we have the Dopeth River catchment, which has a shallow well. And then we have Lokata Water rock catchment. This technology particularly also encouraged us to conserve that rock and then also access water. And this water has been used for production, and definitely on your right, you can see that they are also using it for crop irrigation. So that is the same thing across Dopeth, where we are trapping that water to promote tree planting around the river banks. So the other one we have adopted is the diversification of livelihoods in the northern Caramoja region. And this diversification has included the use of the greenhouse technology, where we are now growing vegetables inside these greenhouses and tree seedlings for agroforestry. That is the greenhouse in Lobanya, that is Kotido, under the EcoDRR project. And then what you are seeing on the right, those are the harvests from the greenhouse. So the other is we are also trying to promote apiculture. That is the keeping of bees. And then piggery reproduction. So that picture you see on the left those are communities receiving beehives and pigs. And then those beehives, we have already established a processing plant whereby we do not want these farmers to go elsewhere or fail to get market. We are building a complete value chain. And this was under a project called IFSP, CAFOD funded. So what they are doing is we are now processing the honey from the farmers, and then we're extracting the wax and other bee products. And actually this is what I'm exhibiting in the stall right now. Yes. So we are ensuring that these farmers also diversify and do not only depend on agriculture or crop production. So we employ a number of youth. Those on the right are the youth exhibiting their products. And then on the right, those are beehives that we have placed along crop fields. These hives help us to fight the wild animals and the problem animals in the Kidepo Valley National Park and communities surrounding. This has been a very good strategy to reduce the human-wildlife conflict in that area. And it has helped us a lot. Instead of waiting for government compensation, this strategy has helped farmers, because the biggest problem we have in Karenga district especially is the wildlife animal, or the problem animal, the elephants and the buffaloes of Kidepo. So, and then the other strategy we're using is the inclusive market access. So we are now, through USAID, CRIS, New York program, which is ongoing, we are now constructing and upgrading those community access roads. We want these farmers to access markets easily. So we are now constructing those community access roads. Not only markets, but even other services. Could be hospitals, could be schools. So that is a 50-kilometer stretch from Awaj to Gangming, so which was constructed under the USAID CRIS New York program. And then we have those are still other community access roads. You will appreciate that this on the left is a mud. That means they still need to ensure that we upgrade more. And then what we have embarked on is also the use of clean energy. The students of International University of East Africa have amazed me, and I'm really very excited that they are now using solar energy to produce tractors for agricultural production. For me, that is really a plus. Imagine a tractor which can plow over tens of acres using solar energy. I think that is, for us at our level, what we are promoting is now the use of motorization of selected community boreholes. Motorizing here is what we use the solar to pump the water from the well, and then we use the distribution pipes to take water nearer to these communities. And this water, as you can see, can be used for both household consumption and then for irrigation. So we have also engaged communities in action resilience planning in the verge of climate change and man-made or natural disasters. Here we have increased access and utilization to early warning information by linking the sub-county disaster management committees to the Uganda National Meteorological Authority. And then we have also mainstreamed the DRR plans or disaster risk reduction initiatives into development plans of the parish, sub-county, and into the district levels. We have also strengthened the community early warning systems through, by blending both scientific and then the traditional early warning mechanisms. This has helped us to compare the two and be able to convince the communities that these two actually are not so different. And then we have also strengthened the reporting channel between the village disaster management committees and sub-counties through capacity building on resilience. These are just adaptive mechanisms. We have increased accessibility to markets. I've already talked about that through access roads or rehabilitation works. So, and then we have also promoted environmental conservation, ecosystems restoration. These are agroforests or woodlots that have been constructed by some of the projects we have been running at community level. And then still those are the trees. And then on the right is not clear, but those are elephant grass. In Caramoja, we do not have the zero grazing technology. For us, we are nomads. But we want to promote the use of zero grazing. So what you are seeing there is elephant grass to provide the alternative feeds for these animals so that they reduce the pressure on the rangelands. So what are some of the challenges that we are facing? One of them is weak policy enforcement. This one was talked of. Yesterday there was a lady here from Ministry of Water and Environment. She had very nice policies, very nice frameworks, very nice laws regarding climate change, regarding food security. But go and ask her how far with the implementation. Really, it is weak. So that is one of the biggest challenges we have. And then we also have lack of commitment from big emitters. These are the developed countries that contribute a lot to the carbon emissions in the atmosphere or the greenhouse gases. This is what Professor is called Obua yesterday. It was like if we in Uganda are comparing our emissions with the Europeans, then we realize that what we are emitting is negligible. But because those bigger economies are emitting more, it has created a global impact, which is affecting us also in Uganda. So that is the biggest problem we have, the largest emitters. And then we also have increased levels of poverty, which have led to heavy reliance on natural ecosystems for survival. And then we have insecurity. This one I cannot miss to talk about it in the Caramoja context. We are now very, very insecure. And this has led to cutting of trees to protect homesteads from the enemies. So you find everywhere the trees are being cut to build. If you have reached Caramoja, the homestead setting is what I'm talking about. And then in that very homestead setting, they still partition it into households using these very trees. So you can see how we are at risk of extinction. So what are some of our recommendations? We are saying we need to strengthen the enforcement of these policies by increasing resources and then also staffing to some of these climate-related sectors or food security-related sectors in our country. Then we also need to task the big emitters. Those are the EUs and the USAs, the Chinas of this world. Please, we need to pressurize them to either find alternative sources or they carry the burden of these risks. And then we also need to develop alternative and clean energy sources. That is what IUEA is doing. And please, we need to support these people because we need to go towards zero carbon emission. And then we also need to address the issue of poverty using sustainable development approaches at whatever level. And then we also need to improve the security of the Caramoja people. So this is solely the task of government, that we need to ensure peace prevails in the whole country. So, and then we also need to integrate resilience plans that are being developed, especially from the village up to the district. We need to integrate them into the district sectoral annual development plans. With that, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
Asante, thank you very much. Today we have a privilege to listen to Dr. Okulo from the government. What they are doing is from the civil society group, which is doing also commendable work on issues of food security and climate change. So I want to thank him. I want to thank all the presenters. Let us clap for them all. I beg we take a break. We go for lunch at the VIP lounge there. And let us come. We hope to come here by 3:15. There will be a few papers and then the launching of the 1 acre model, the 1 acre outcome project. That will be done at the. Okay, so he says distributing a coupon. You go and stand at the gate. Thank you very much. Please, let's come. These are very interesting things. I don't know, have you heard the story of Caramoja anywhere? No. It's only here. Have you heard about the story of the architects doing agriculture? Amazing. Amazing, amazing. And then Professor has given us everything about soil and land management. If you want, just practice, that's all. Thank you very much for attending. Let's have a lunch, and we'll come back.
Before you, yes, and then once we finish that, then that will be okay. Yeah. So, well done. Yeah, but I want to get some other things. Is this lady coming? Is this lady coming from? Yes. My brother, let's test this thing, close. I'm hoping it's got this sound. If I said I want sound here.
You know it's supposed to play from there. I need to get your sound perfect. Supposed to connect to your from there. Otherwise, here, this will not be sound.
Yeah, no video.
No video.
Nah, it's not possible. The sound is there, the sound is there, the video is here. Yeah.
For the video files. Maybe after